How's it going, everybody? I'm Ryan. He's Abby. We're the Expansion Bros, and we are back for another exciting episode of the Expansion Bros podcast. And welcome to the land of the outside looking in, Abby. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing okay, but the Canucks we've been on a little bit of a little slide here, and I think it's about time we snap out of it.
I mean, I'd like to see that. Hey, can you guys try closing out a game, potentially winning it in regulation, maybe once or
Yeah,
twice?
we are overtime loss margins. We got 10 of them on the season. We're already in double digits, and we're in January. But I think it's 10 in total, and I think we were discussing earlier. It's a very interesting dynamic because there's no real trend to it. It's not like we're consistently blowing leads or consistently having to play catch up. It's a mix of both, um, which is both a good and a bad thing. Because if you know what's wrong, you can try to fix it. But also, if it's not one or the other, that means you don't have one glaring problem. It just means maybe little tweaks can fix something. But it's definitely concerning. This is not how, not to be Captain Obvious, but this is not how it went last season.
No, last season you guys were able to get these points, and maybe it was a bit of puck luck. Maybe something needs to be tweaked. Maybe, I don't know, it's chemistry or lines or just shooting percentages, and maybe it's the blue line and the goaltending, right? You don't have Demko, who's obviously an elite goaltender who's able to steal you some of those games in regulation that, I think we looked at it in 5 of your 10 you were leading. I don't know. I think there were like 2 games, the Canadiens game, and then one more where you kind of went back and
Philly,
forth.
I think.
Was it Philly? Yeah, you were ahead by a couple, and then you trailed by a couple, and then you ended up forcing overtime. It's like, do we count that as you were leading and you blew it, or do we count that as you came back because it was in the second half of the game you were trailing? So essentially, it was like 5-5 or 6-4 or something along those lines of how many games were you leading versus how many you were trailing that you forced overtime. I think when you're trailing and you force overtime, that's definitely you look at that overtime loss as a win because you got a point. But when you're leading and it goes to overtime, right? You don't force overtime; it just goes to overtime. Notice the different wording there on that,
Yeah.
obviously. So if you guys could have closed those out in regulation, I think we're talking like 5 more points ish. Obviously, this
Yeah.
is in perfect land, and we don't live
Of
in
course.
perfect land, but you'd be right there with the LA Kings. So honestly, I don't think I'd be panicked too much. Right, you hit the halfway mark of the season, 42 games. You guys are racking up points when you need to, but I think just performance wise, you need to start shifting in the right direction and soon here.
Yeah, speaking of shifting in the right direction, we can go into a little bit into the diagnosis of why exactly I think we are here. But I think we had a really big statement win coming off the Maple Leafs, a 3-0 shutout, when we were the road team playing 3 games in 4 days. Just got freaking pounded in by the Hurricanes, absolutely stifled offensively, letting freaking Dustin Tokarski record a shutout in the year 2025.
I love Tokarski. Never forget.
He was supposed to be the next Carey Price. Um, but well, after getting just absolutely stifled, absolutely dominating, honestly, there was definitely some points where the Leafs had some momentum, but the Canucks absolutely dominated the Leafs and really showed what they can do, which is part of the frustrating part of the season, is they don't just suck. They definitely have their moments where they suck and their defense sucks and Carson Soucy sucks and Noah Juleson sucks even more. And Gillian Breezeball sucks, and now I'm just throwing half the defense under the bus. But the point is, like, it's just can do so good. Like with this shitty defense, they shut out the Leafs. The Leafs, who've been incredibly hot, who I know they came off a bad game against who was it? Were they up against? I think it was Boston. They lost 6-3. The Hurricanes. Oh, there you go. Coincidentally, the Hurricanes. But before that, they were on a big win streak, a 5-game win streak. So to shut them out, especially after they had just lost, they're probably more motivated. And they
Yeah,
were
you'd
the
expect
rested
that bounce
team.
back game.
Exactly, and the Canucks were the ones to win that game. It just gives you a lot of hope, and hopefully this is a game you have to build off of. And I think we want to talk about diagnosing. I think you go from the net out in terms of least responsible. Um, the goalies, Kevin Lankinen, has been goddamn brilliant. Again, the best signing of the offseason. I know Jake DeBrusk has been good. I know Kiefer Sherwood's been excellent. Like we've had some good signings, but Kevin Lankinen is by far the best signing of this offseason. without him, this season is lost.
And you
Um,
see so many teams across the league struggle to find just adequate goaltending. Oh god, like the Carolina, I felt for a few years like they were a
oh
great
yeah,
team, but they couldn't find goaltending. And I think I'm missing. There's a big team in my head right now that like everybody knows. Oh, New
yeah.
Jersey with
Well,
Lindy
Carolina
Ruff.
too, their goalies always got hurt. Ronta always got hurt. Anderson always got hurt. They always had this weird three goalie system as well with Kachekov for a little bit here, or not even Kachekov, just some random goalie sometimes. James Reimer was there for a cup of coffee. It just felt like they were always cycling through so many goalies around Ronta and Anderson.
Yeah, and you look at then like yeah, Carolina, New Jersey, really quality teams that needed goaltending,
Yeah.
and the Canucks, to their credit, I mean goalies are voodoo. Like I love goaltending, and I think goalies are like super interesting. Like some of the best ones, they can steal you games and everything like that. Like no other position can, but I don't really like with the Sabres. I don't talk about goaltending because I don't know whether if this is the year that Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen turns into prime Dominic Hasek or turns into prime Dustin Tokarski, right? Like I don't know which way it's going to go, and I feel like 90% of goaltenders across the league are that way. And for you
Yeah.
guys to spin the roulette wheel, hit on Kevin Lankinen, and bide your time until Demko comes back, goes out, comes back again. So I mean that you are missing a little bit from Demko to Lankinen, but it's not like it's been, hey, the Canucks, they're this perfect team and they're just being let down by the guy between the pipes. I mean, maybe that would be a better scenario for Canucks fans because right now it's like, what's the issue? What is the finger on the
Well,
pulse? What do we need?
I don't think it is a better situation because what management has shown is even if the issue is very glaring, they're not going to fucking make a trade. Like, let's be very honest here. Yes, the forwards could be doing more. Yes, shooting percentage. Yes, PDO. Yes, 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 yes. Miller Pedersen drama, alleged drama. If anything, I think the media is creating this pressure on the Canucks. Fuck the media. I guess technically we're a part of the media now, but still, fuck the media. Um,
You either die a hero or live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
it's fine. I'm gonna kill the villains from the inside. You'll see me like pulling up to TSN, just like, pew, pew, just kidding. I'm no threats of violence. But point being, I think the problem with the Canucks is the defense because bloody half of them are injured, and half of them, when not injured, still suck. Like I think I was looking at this earlier. Carson Soucy and Noah Juleson are just abysmal defensemen. Like uh, Carson Soucy, I'm not sure what Carson Soucy, but he was a very low percentile. There was I think 10th percentile in the league, and Juleson even worse at 6th percentile. And fucking Tocchet loves these defensemen for some reason. When we have a perfectly healthy Eric Brandstrom who got waived, thank goodness, cleared waivers. But at this point, I almost wanted him to get claimed because we're not even using him, and he's one of our better defensemen. He's our third best puck moving defenseman. At a point, he was our only healthy puck moving defenseman, and he still wasn't getting played consistently, which is mind blowing considering he played pretty well when he was in. When they let him play, he played well.
I think he's one of your few defensemen that actually have a positive game score when he's in there.
Yeah,
And
or I
it's
think it
just
was just slightly negative, something like that. It was not bad.
okay. Yeah, it was early. It was positive. Now it's very very negative. Negative
Oh,
2.8 net
oh
rating.
wow. Okay. Now, so maybe I need to calm down on my Brandstrom pumping here.
Well, pause. It's really easy to get just kind of absorbed in the first like one or two games of a player's career, or like that you've been exposed to them and like, hey, that's the player I know, and like that was good, and that's what he is forever. But when you look at like his expected goals for to expected goals against, more against than for, and really just hasn't been a great player. I'm sorry, his game score is negative 0.01, so he's about average, but his net
Okay.
rating is in the 25th percentile or lower. So he's not been
Okay.
a really quality player for you guys, and obviously still
Yeah.
young and has potential. We were talking about him versus Brisebois in the last episode, but I really do think
Yeah.
you guys need to make a move for a defenseman. And there are defensemen out there, but there's not a ton of appealing options. So, I mean, is management, are they waiting till somebody continues to drop out and their mindset changes? Like, hey, Buffalo's now willing to give up on the season, which they should. Or like Kevin Adams is still trying to buy versus, hey, let me just sell off a guy like Bowen Byram because I'm not going to re-sign him. Or are they just trying to find the right player and can't strike a deal? Like, we don't know what kind of calls are going on behind the scenes. And when Elliot Friedman or those guys report, it's because somebody wants the rest of the league to know that this is happening, right? So if Vancouver doesn't want the league to know they're out there hunting for defensemen, then Elliot Friedman or any of those guys aren't going to be tweeting out that the Vancouver Canucks have made calls on a bunch of defensemen. So
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think a couple of defensemen the Canucks have been linked to, and God forbid, from the Sharks, Cody Ceci and Mario Ferraro. Mario Ferraro seems okay, but again, I think Mario Ferraro is kind of more of a bottom pairing defenseman. He's got some good offensive upside, but his defense is not something that's going to be helping this team significantly. And again, we already have 4, 5 bottom 6 defensemen. I understand maybe they're playing so poorly that Mario Ferraro would technically be an improvement, especially on the Sharks team that he is on. He'd probably be an improvement over Juleson or even Zusi at this point. But at that point, that's not much of an upgrade. And why are you giving up assets to make that kind of trade? The other player from the Sharks we're being linked to, and I swear to God, I might burn a fucking Canucks jersey if we trade for him. Cody Ceci. Now, speaking of percentiles, Mr. Bread, um, he is depending on the model here. I think we were discussing earlier. We don't know if they go to 0 percentile or 1 percentile. Cody is in the first percentile for being a shitty defenseman.
And to translate that for any non-statistical person is if you're in the first percentile, that means you are better than 1% of other defensemen. Meaning if you're in the 99th percentile, you're better than 99% of defensemen. So you're better than most. If you're in the first percentile, you're better than almost nobody. Now, listen, I've never been a big Cody Ceci fan. I've never thought he's been that good. I don't know how he's had such, I don't want to call it an illustrious career, but he seems to be playing a ton of minutes and getting paid good contracts. I'm not sure why, but to his defense, he is playing the 24 or the 30th toughest quality of competition, according to expected goals above replacement. And that is insane for a guy like Cody Ceci. Talking about like Sam Reinhart, Alexander Barkov, David Perron, Austin Matthews, Elias Lindholm. Those are guys like towards the top of the list. You've got Ryan O'Reilly. Like those guys are your classic, like, okay, we trust these guys against the best in the league to shut them down. Cody Ceci should not be anywhere near the top 50. I mean, listen, there's 751 entries, and he's in 30th of quality of competition. So to his credit, he's probably playing way above his head, and maybe coming to Vancouver, not having to play that quality of competition that like let Hronik and Hughes play against those guys and let him play against a bit lighter competition. You might see his numbers improve. That doesn't mean he's going to be good, but I still think he could be better than some of the guys you have on the team now. So I wouldn't go as far to burn the jersey just yet, but on the surface, I don't love the move for you guys.
Yeah, again, like this is the problem. They can't just keep getting the same player. You already have Derek Forbert. You already have Vinny Desharnais. You already have Noah Juleson. You already have so many number 6 defensemen. This isn't freaking a card game where you're trying to get fucking 4 of a kind. You're trying to get different freaking defensemen. Like, and this is where the other player the Canucks have been linked to. I think part of this is when you talk about JT Miller, it said the only place he'd be willing to kind of waive his no trade clause to is New York.
Not Buffalo?
Hey, well, that will just take a little convincing. It's very close, New York, Madison Square Garden to what's the arena called?
KeyBank Center.
Okay, I was right. KeyBank Center. How far is that?
About 7-ish hours, probably closer to 8 with traffic. If you're going to the arena, it's like 6.5 to 7 if you're driving fast down the 90.
I will retract my point. You know what? This is my fun Canadian time. When you look at a map, we're like, oh, it's just states. I wonder how far it is over, because if I'm like, driving to Alberta, it's probably about a day. But you know what? For some reason, American states just look so much closer together. You just look like, oh, it's there and there. It's like 2 centimeters. I wonder, it's probably like a couple hours between. 8 hours. Never mind. Point devoid. That's not close enough for me to be like, same area. That's not the same area.
This is your moment, like I had a few weeks ago with Whitehorse in Vancouver.
Whitehorse, yeah.
Obviously, mine was more egregious, but still.
No, mine's pretty bad as well. I'll hold my hands up here. Not an American geography expert. This is why we have an American and a Canadian. So
Both
we know
coasts, baby. All time
exact
zones
and both
covered.
coasts. That's right. That's right. We're North America. What's the global version of North? We're continental. Um, but is from the Rangers, Braden Schneider, to get to the guy. Um, of all the defensemen we've mentioned so far, out of both the Canucks and the Sharks defenseman, there he's the best defenseman out of the bunch. But again, still not an amazing defensive defenseman. A good offensive defenseman, 71st percentile. So he can certainly move the puck. Which again, the Canucks have needed puck moving defensemen, and I think obviously if you can move the puck right, we've seen with Quinn Hughes the best defense is a good offense. Obviously, Quinn Hughes also backs it up by using his speed for defense as well, and maybe with the coaching of Adam Foote and Sergei Gonchar, Schneider could better utilize his speed and offensive talents on defense. But that's not a guarantee. And again, we really just need some fucking defensive help at this point, right? He is still, as a poor off defensive defenseman, he's still better than a lot of our defensemen defensively, which is so sad. But at this point, we just need help. We just need like someone who is of a top 4 quality to come over and move some of these guys down in the lineup. Again, like you said, right? One of the problems might be the defensive defenseman quality we're looking for. Like Pittsburgh probably hasn't given up on the season yet, so they probably aren't willing to ship out players like Marcus Pettersson yet, or other strong defensemen. Like Calgary probably hasn't given up yet to go Rasmus Anderson. So these are all things we don't really know about, and I guess we'll have a better idea about heading into next month and heading closer to the trade deadline. When do people, be willing to give up those assets? Because the Canucks got Zadorov. I don't remember when the exact trade was. We can look this up. But the Canucks got Zadorov pretty early on.
Yeah, those were the couple moves, the Lindholm and Zadorov trades that you guys made were not deadline moves. They were about this time of year, closer to the end of the month here, I think.
It was even earlier, actually. Sorry, it was December 3rd. We got Zadorov.
Oh wow, that is an early trade. The Lindholm trade was like end of January, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
But no, see, this is, and I think that maybe that move gives us a false sense of security that decent defensemen are available that early on. Maybe that's just not true, and we just got lucky in that one case. But again, right, like this is where we've been talking about it over and over and over again. I don't want to beat a dead horse here, but if a team is struggling defensively, you need to trade for a defenseman and trade for a defenseman that's good at defense.
I wonder, I know that it sounds very obvious, but I wonder if part of the issue is you guys not being able to get the puck out of the zone. Yes, there's a case to be made for zone denials, but if the puck's going to get in there and when it does, you need to be good at zone exits as well. And I think that could be a big reason why maybe they're looking at this more offensive-minded defenseman, because they've internally with their analytics or their just coaching staff has identified, hey, the issue for us isn't necessarily stopping people from getting in. It's when they get in, we can't get out very cleanly and with control, and we just face wave after wave. And that's something I think that like that 4-of-a-kind defenseman you've been talking about, right? That's kind of not what they do. They aren't good puck movers to get it out. So you may look at like, hey, we're looking at all these offensive defensemen, but our defense is bad. Sometimes it's maybe one of those, hey, if we're in the offensive zone and we can get the puck out of the defensive zone when we get a chance, like we don't have to worry about defense nearly as much. And maybe that's something that they've identified they've lost from last year that they want to go out and find, and all of a sudden the pieces fall into place. But just a potential, because you get so fixated on, for example, Owen Power for the Sabres. Everyone's like, oh, he's not very good defensively. It's like, okay, sure, he's not hitting people and he could be better at clearing the crease, but he's pretty good at zone denials with his length and his size. And then zone exits, he's awesome at getting out with control. So that's something that like the average fan doesn't see, because we cleanly get out of through the neutral zone thanks to Owen Power, and he doesn't get a point because, the forwards and other things in a cycle. But that play doesn't happen without Owen Power getting it out of the zone. And I would not classify Owen Power as a defensive-minded defenseman, but that's where that kind of mentality could come in. So again, I'm playing devil's advocate here, but I would give some of these guys, besides Cody Ceci, the benefit of the doubt if you did go out and get them.
Okay. Well, you know what? Cody Ceci was the only one I was threatening to burn the jersey for. So let's I'll stay optimistic for those and kind of wait with bated breath. And again, either way, at that point, right? Like we just need somebody now. And at this point, right? Like it's as we get on with the days and we get closer to the trade deadline, just want to see someone come in. Obviously, the Canucks also have help coming in that they already have hired. Philip Hronik has started skating, which is amazing news.
Just a
Need him
bit
to
over a
roll.
week away from his return, correct? For based on the timelines.
Yeah, I believe so. So hopefully you want to make sure you ease him in slowly. Last thing you need is him going down again. Hughes has a splint on his finger. Like, let's just try to get these guys healthy towards the playoffs, right? Obviously, you have to try to make the playoffs, but if they're not healthy into the playoffs, we might as well miss it at this point because we're not going to make any noise without Hughes and Hronik healthy. And then muzzle fucking tank for who was this year? Tank for
That's the problem. That
Lisa.
as a Sabres fan, that's the problem. Like if they're going to be awful and one of the bottom 5 in the league, this is the worst year to potentially have a shot at the number 1 overall. Like next year with Gavin McKenna, like slam dunk, number 1 overall, like makes sense. This is not the year that there's number 1 slam dunk. It's another one of those, hey, there's like 3, 4, maybe 5 guys that are all pretty good. Nobody's looking like a stud. Like no Celebrini, no McDavid Eichel. Like there's nothing like that. So
It's more of like the Nolan Patrick Nico Hischier kind of year.
yeah, so you can still find good talent, Nico Hischier, but it's harder and harder to really get excited or like we're tanking for this guy or hey, if the Sabres suck and finish at the bottom, we at least could get this guy. And it's like there's no guy this year of that quality. So
Yep. No, and that's the thing is obviously like I say we should just tank, but obviously I'm jesting. I don't want to see the Canucks lose. But with Hronik coming back again, we'll see how Hronik kind of fits in. As long as they can stay healthy at that point, I still think regardless you need to trade for a defenseman. Again, with Hronik in, then you can kind of experiment. I think they've decided they're pretty much attaching Hronik to Hughes' wing, but if you absolutely need to, you can play Hronik on your middle pairing. And then at that point, if you go get a Mario Ferrara or something, right? Hronik's may be good enough to hold up that other defenseman. And again, Hronik is more of the puck moving defenseman as well and more offensively focused, but he is defensively strong enough to where he can buoy someone a lot better than Susie or Myers or whoever they decide to put on that middle pairing to try and hold up the other person.
and I don't know if you got to see it, but I did send you Bowen Byram's player card. So I know we were talking about all these players' player cards, and I'm just shipping off Bowen Byram to any buyer at this point because I don't think they're going to pay him and extend him and have the right amount of cap space for him. But I mean, he's the absolute slam dunk to me. Now you're going to have to give up more to get him, I think, based on like value of some of these guys. But he makes sense to me for you guys, especially if, you know, you've got to rest Quinn Hughes for his finger or Hronik's not 100%. I mean, he's the kind of guy that can pick up that slack, but just as easily slot into a number 3 role like he currently is, or he plays alongside a Dahlin. He looks great and he can hold his own on his own line. So I think Bowen Byram makes a lot of. I want to see our teams make a trade, man, of substance. No more Riley Stillman for Josh Bloom. None of that. give me something to sink my teeth into and debate here, whether it was good value or not.
You know, as time goes on and I get more and more desperate, and the more and more I think about it, it was never about me not liking Bowen Byram. You look at his defense and his offense; it's not bad at all. Again,
That's playing on the Sabres.
overall, 63rd percentile playing defense, right? And then again, I give credit to our coaches. I think our coaches can make any defenseman better. I know that Forbert and Desharnais haven't exactly been excellent, but I think they're just sometimes players just not good. So I think with someone who, like Byram, who appears to be a very good puck moving defenseman, who is solid enough defensively to be better than at least half the league. It's just overall an improvement. And again, that's where the question comes in: what are we giving up now to get Bowen Byram? At that point, does that mean we have to give up a 8-hour away from home JT Miller or Elias Pettersson, or is there a package with Höglander prospects and first round pick and second round pick that can, you know, land us Bowen Byram? And at that point, now you're going all in on this season. Is that worth the risk? There's a whole lot of variables there you have to think about.
Personally, if I'm in the Canucks shoes, one final thing here. If I'm in the Canucks shoes, I'm not going all in on this season because it doesn't feel like the season, right? Obviously,
Mhm.
things can change. We've seen the Florida Panthers sneak in, but I think on paper they were always good enough. They just didn't have um, the results that year. With this Canucks team, I think you may get in and sure anything can happen, but Bowen Byram doesn't magically fix the blue line depth. And of course,
Yeah.
players are going to get banged up in the postseason with your already banged up players. And personally, I'm making a couple band-aid moves to make it and see what happens, right? See if your stars can be stars. But I don't know if I'd be willing to give up firsts and high-level prospects and things like that just to make it this year.
Yeah. In addition to that, the Canucks are also missing. I believe it's their third round pick this year, next year, and then their second round pick the year after that. So again, trading away even more draft picks is starting to get into a very dicey situation. I think I saw a graphic on Instagram the other day. I don't know if it was from I don't remember which account it was from, but basically, I think over the last 5 years, it is the Canucks have only had two first round picks, something crazy like that. There's something wrong. I don't remember what it was. I have to find it. But it was something crazy where it was talking about how much the Canucks trade away their picks. Um,
Yeah, you guys have
for-
adopted the LA Rams mentality of I don't want them picks, like give me players. And I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
I
yeah.
get it, right? Because the probability that a third rounder becomes Casey to Smith is probably pretty low.
Mhm.
You guys traded a fourth round pick for Eric Brandstrom, so and you got Tucker Poolman off the books, I believe, that way too.
Mhm.
So yeah, it was worth a swing. And Eric Brandstrom's made the NHL and he's played NHL games, right? So it's worth a swing because honestly, as much as these 4, 5, 6, and 7s, they're fun to root for at the World Juniors. How much of an
Yeah.
impact are they actually going to make? But a first round pick, like those are the ones you want to keep, and those are the ones you want to hit on because that's where like the majority of NHLers come from.
Mhm. No, absolutely. I think again, once you get beyond the third round, which I think is a 10% chance for the player to make the NHL. So out of 30 players, that's like three, or if you're rounding up because it's 32, four.
On a
The
good year,
chances are
yep.
not that huge. Yeah.
So honestly, I don't know if I'd be willing to give up first and seconds. We've talked about how devoid your prospect pool is. You probably do want to surround this core with as much talent now, though, because I know Quinn Hughes is still rather young. But you guys aren't in the Sabres position, right? You guys are league average as far as age, so you're not past it. But you're not there yet. Obviously, you haven't made the Cup final. So I think getting younger may not be the right move, but you also don't want to be like, okay, we went all in. This 3 year stretch was great. We made it to the Cup final and won, and now we're like just dead for the next 6 years because we have no picks.
Yeah, and doing that again, if you make the cup final or if you win the cup, then everything is forgiven. Then you have to rebuild or whatever you have to do. That's okay. But if you only make it to say the second round, then this is completely unacceptable. You can't gut your team to make it to the second round. You just can't do that. It's bad management.
It would be a very, very risky strategy, job job security and all that. But just
Yeah,
knowing that if this core reaches its ceiling at game 6 of the Western Conference final, right? And
yeah,
that's their ceiling. They never make it back there.
yeah,
Was that worth, just not having any prospects and picks? Now trading away guys like Quinn Hughes or Pedersen or Besser and those guys, you'll reacquire that stuff, but that's way too in the future. Let's not get
yeah.
into
Let's
that
let's not even
scenario.
talk about
But that, I
that.
mean, but that is one way that if you're looking at it like, hey, we can go all in now, and then if it doesn't work, we can sell these guys off, get assets, and try
Yeah,
again. So
that's true.
maybe I'm talking myself into, hey, why not go for it? Because once you're there, you've got the talent, and you never know, right? Like a decor of Byram, Hughes, and um, Hronik.
Chronic.
You've got Miller, Patterson, Besser, DeBrusque, Garland. You've got a bunch of guys, and Demko comes back, and you can make a real run at it, right?
Mhm.
It's just, man, the West is stacked. Like trying to get through Winnipeg right now, or Dallas is starting to heat up. You got Vegas and Edmonton. LA is playing good hockey, so there's a lot of tough teams there, and I don't want to be like afraid of the challenge. And hell, Colorado's in the wild card 1 spot, right? So
Yeah.
I don't want to say like, oh well, we don't want to go unless we're all guaranteed, but like this doesn't feel like the year to capitalize on. This feels like a year to maybe make a move and see what happens, not the year to go all in on.
No, I agree. Again, the West looks incredibly strong. Like you said, the Colorado on the not in the outside looking in, but at least for the divisional section, you're right. The Wild are having a really good season. The Stars are having a good season. The Jets had the hot start. Golden Knights, Oilers, Kings, all having incredible seasons. Even the Flames really keeping pace right now. We'll see how long that keeps up for if the Flames can continue to keep pace. But it's not like the Canucks have an easy in right now. If you look at the playoff setting, right, with how the Jets and Wild have been playing, you don't expect them to drop out. Stars and Avalanche, again, powerhouse teams on this side. The Golden Knights and Oilers, again, who you expected, and then the Kings are thriving. The Canucks would have to knock out one of the Kings and the Flames in the playoff race, realistically. So you have to see, can the Canucks acquire players to the point where they can do that, or will the Kings and Flames use their own assets to acquire players to get in that position? And then at that point, are you better off selling
Yeah, I don't know if I would sell maybe a
or
couple.
retool maybe? Like yeah.
Yeah, right. Like let's be cautious about how we're calling it here, because like
I
I
just
don't
want to
want
clarify.
people to
Sorry.
take and run like we should sell off
Get
Pettersson
rid of
because
everybody.
yeah, right. No fire sales here, but no, sell a couple players, expiring contracts. I think you guys are too close to do that, really. So unfortunately, you're stuck in that limbo land where you're probably not going to sell off, but you're also probably not going to buy too much. You're just going to kind of ride it out, which I know is not going to please the Vancouver mob. But it's probably what's the smartest thing for the franchise. Because let's be honest, this is a core it's a quality core. You just need to find the right pieces around it. And while you did that in the forward core, you need to be smart about the D core, potentially now or in the offseason. But I would not retool. I would just add to the core, you know. And obviously, if a guy like Hoglander's not working out, well, there's your one of your trade chips to go get a Mario Ferraro and see how he fits in, right? I don't know what the value is. Obviously, I'm not in the room, but you know, that's at least how I would approach this.
Yeah, no, for sure. I agree. And sorry, selling maybe wasn't the right word, but a little retool, like you said, like this is where like if there's value in players like Forbert or Desharnais or these players, this is where you ship them off. If you think you're not gonna make it come deadline time. And those are players where again you if we're gonna play freaking Brisebois and Friedman and Jolson and Brandstrom and all these guys anyways, might as well play them because we've traded away these older guys we have for picks.
Yeah, exactly. So I think the Canucks, I think you guys still have it. Obviously, your goals for and goals against right now need to improve. You can't have a negative differential and expect to make the playoffs. And I personally
Absolutely.
think you guys need to focus more on offense, which I know we keep talking about the blue line and defense. We need defensive
Yeah.
defensemen, but looking at where you guys rank, you know, in the league, your league average in goals against, but your goals for are lacking, right? They're not horrible,
Yeah.
but they are lacking. So
Absolutely.
improving that end maybe is why they're looking at these more offensive minded defensemen
Yeah.
like Ferraro, like Schneider and things like
Schneider.
that. So maybe
Yeah.
Bowen Byram is another guy that fits that mold too. But speaking of Bowen Byram, let's go ahead and move on to the Buffalo Sabres.
Yes.
They're still in last place in the East, and they have picked up their play recently. So since we last spoke, they have won 2 games and lost 1. They beat the Capitals in a shootout, which I don't mind giving a team like the Capitals a point as long as we get 2. Then we beat Ottawa pretty handily 4-0. Like that was a really, really solid performance. And then of course the Sabres had to follow that up with going up 2-0 against the Kraken, who are currently floundering, and then
Yeah.
conceding 6 straight goals unanswered. So
That's
they
tough.
laid an egg. And to me, this is just a sign of a young team at this point. But with the context of the entire season, these kind of eggs, like, I mean, the Fire Adams chance started up again. And, you know, it's so easy to get sucked into that. And like I've been saying this whole time, the season's a lost cause, but I'm trying not to be overly negative about it. Well, at the same time, I'm acknowledging we're not really going to go anywhere this season. I'm trying not to just like let every loss feel like, oh, why haven't they fired somebody yet? Because, you know,
Mhm.
since they broke the 13 game losing streak. I know that's a very low bar, but they are 5-3-1 in that stretch. That is
Hey,
a
that's not bad. That's not bad at all.
61.1% points percentage.
Yeah.
If they were kept on this 61% points percentage for the rest of the season, they'd finish with 84 points.
Hey,
So
still not exactly a high bar, but you know what? That's better than what they're projecting.
yeah, where they're trending right now, you know, being last in the East and everything like that, I find it hard to believe that. Well, one of the two things is going to happen is either they're going to move up or they're going to not play at this 61% points percentage for the rest of the year, right? And
Hmm.
it was at that point where I was, talking to you a little bit ago where I was like, "Hey, I just want to see signs that the culture's changed and that they can do it. Like we haven't seen this team be able to do it. And if they do, that'd be great. I mean, honestly, draft picks be damned. We talked about how this isn't exactly a strong draft class, like with a number one elite dude. So there's no reason to be excited to finish at the bottom. It just sucks because you look at that 13 game losing streak, and we mentioned it. You pick up maybe 3 wins in that 13 game stretch, and then you're on pace to finish the season at 90 points. Maybe you pick up, 5 of those 13, right? So you're still 5-8, or excuse me, 5-3 over that stretch. That's pretty average. And you keep
Hmm.
playing like you're playing now. We're talking about a 94 point team that's probably going to make the playoffs. I mean, the best wild card team as far as points percentage is Ottawa still, and they don't
Yeah.
look great right now. 4-5-1 in their last 10. Nobody seems to want to get in the wild card position, and they're playing at a 536 points percentage, which ends up at 88 points. So the Sabres are
Hmm.
currently on pace to finish 3, maybe 4 points out of the playoffs, which is crazy considering all that's happened. I don't think
Hmm.
they do it. I mean, obviously, this team is just, they're streaky, they're young, and I think what we're seeing is there's just not enough talent from top to bottom on this roster. There is enough, I think, to be a playoff team, but I think they don't know how to win. And I think couple that with they are not star-studded from top to bottom, rolling 3 lines of just great players, and I just don't see it going anywhere this season.
Yeah, and I think if you look at the East as well, right? Teams on the bottom right now are doing fairly well. You think about a team like Columbus, which was considered, dead in the water this year. Um, they're, in a wild card spot. It looks like is it a wild card spot? Yeah, they're in a wild card spot. Oh, I think Ottawa's out.
Ottawa's technically out, but looking at points percentage, they're ahead of
Ah,
Boston.
okay, okay. Gotcha. Yeah. So they're competing for the wild card. You look at the other teams in the Sabres division as well, all of them are either point percentage wise, as you said, in a playoff spot, or if you look at both the Red Wings and the Canadians, the Red Wings are on a 7 game winning streak, and the Canadians are 7-2-1 in their last 10. Everyone's been winning games here or there. All of them are above Bettman 500. Um, so something's got to give here. I can see the Metros, a little bit weaker on the bottom half, but even then, right, when your entire division is above Bettman 500, it's going to be very, very hard for the Sabres to kind of make a push. And like you said, right, with the Kraken loss, and I feel sometimes this way with the Canucks, right, is you can either get very, very into the positives or very, very into the negatives with these teams, and then you have the opposite happen, and it's just a weird emotion. So, like you said, you guys are building momentum. You're on this good point pace. If you pick up that win against the Kraken, who are not a good team, you really build momentum and you start to get yourself back into this race. But then you just have that freaking 6 goal straight collapse, and it just like deflates you. Same way the other way with the Canucks, they're like overtime loss, overtime loss, overtime loss, and then bang, 2-0 shutout loss to Dustin Tokarski. But then a win against Toronto, a shutout win against Toronto, and it's just a complete momentum changer. So, like you said, right, it's a characteristic of a young team to have these kind of streaks back and forth. But um, with this team in particular, it's hard. It's just hard with them sometimes to read them. Because again, like you said, right, they have talents, they have goal scorers, they have talented players, they have 3 great defensemen. Well, at least 3 great defensemen. Um, so maybe it is a move, right? Like let's go to crazy land here for a second. Right? Let's say the Sabres decide to ship off their first round pick and young assets to get a JT Miller, and you convince him to come to Buffalo. How much does that help you? Can you now compete with Ottawa for a wild card spot?
Well, okay. This season, I think the 13 game losing streak, the Sabres, I think the Sabres like playing without pressure for the holidays. They like going home and not feeling stressed. So
Hmm.
they like to end their season by Christmas every year. But next season, we would certainly, I would be shocked if the Sabres weren't projected by many to be at least a playoff team. I know we keep having this conversation is that on paper the Sabres look right and certain models love them, certain models think they'll be, average, and if they're just above average for a stretch, they might exceed those projection models and whatnot. But I think a guy like JT Miller or Pettersson, who we talked about this before, I think before we press record, that sure, the Sabres might be calling about guys like Pettersson and Miller, but Miller's not coming here because he's got a no trade clause. Pettersson, the Sabres have some honestly pressure to get that done sooner rather than later because his no movement clause doesn't kick in until July. So if they can get a deal done between now and the deadline, maybe early summer, I think. Yeah, draft day, right? If they can get that done, then they can get him. But again, July 1st hits and Pettersson is by all means going to say no to Buffalo. I mean, who right now across the league is going to look at the Sabres and be like, that's an organization I really want to go to and leave my current team?
Someone from Buffalo, hopefully.
No, even Marcus Foligno trashed us, dude. He was like, well, we're in a little bit of a slump, but at least we're not Buffalo. I'm like, he's from this area. He's from here. Mm-hmm. He played here. So he's throwing pot shots at us. Like, thanks, bud. But honestly, and there's contracts to be signed and extensions and dollars. And you look at the Sabres cap situation next season, and the cap is, well, if we just assume it's going to be flat, they're projected to have $26 million in cap space. I think it might go up by $5-ish million, maybe $3 million to be conservative, go up to the low 90s. Right? I don't think it'll stay at 88. I think it will go up, and I think they're talking about it going up. So let's just say it goes up to 91, gets us another 3. We're looking at about $29 million in cap space. Wow. Now, here are the guys that I want to watch down the stretch, because I think this could either hurt or help their trade value for some of these guys, but also for their dollar amount that they're going to sign. Some of the RFAs we're talking about. So we got a guy like Jason Zucker, who's been an absolute gem, but he's having an awesome year at 32. I don't know how much he's going to be able to replicate this kind of season next year, although even if he takes a step back in points, you'd hope that he'd be able to coach the guys up. I think he's on pace right now for the best season of his career. If we just toggle a per-game stat, he's, second best season of his career since he was 26 in his prime. He was at 0.78 points per game. He's at 0.72 this year. So I really just don't see like him being able to replicate this. That's not the guy Jason Zucker's really ever been. But if you do end up bringing him back and not trading him away, then I think he's a great guy for the locker room. I think he's then going to slot into that third line role, and you're hoping one of the other young guns is ready for like a top line role, or maybe you make a trade, right? So let's live in the hypothetical world where the Sabres trade Cousins and Byram for Pettersson. And then you've got Pettersson with Thompson and Tuck. Maybe Tuck is not your ideal first liner. Maybe you put JJ Peterka on that line then because he has less defensive responsibility. I don't know. I feel like you can still maybe get some more, or you have Thompson and Pettersson be your 1 and 2C. But then going down here, we got Greenway, who's been on IR all year. He looked good when he was playing, but I don't know if they will or would want to re-sign him. Ryan McLeod has been good. He's been solid. He's streaky as far as points are concerned, but he's still got really good defensive impact. He's got 21 points. He's a +4. I don't know how in the world he's a +4 on this team.
On the Sabres? My goodness. In this economy.
He's the second best plus-minus on the team. At +4. So I know plus-minus isn't the best metric, but at least gives you a little sense that he's significantly outperforming everybody else. 7 goals as well. So he's on pace for 14-ish goals, 40 points, and he's really like a third line defensive, center, really known for his skating, not point getting. So I think you can extend him not all that expensively. He's an RFA. Nicholas Aube-Kubel is making $1.5 million. I think they've had him scratched more often than they've played him, so he doesn't really need to be re-signed for anything significant, right? $1.5 million is what he's making.
18 games played. He's not a regular NHLer on this team.
Right, exactly. So you could probably even get him at a pay cut or just keep him at $1.5 million. But then we get to the next couple big ones, right? We got 3 big ones here. The first one we'll start with is JJ Peterka. This is a really tough one for me to project. Peterka, he's got 32 points, but he's only got 10 goals. So that goal scoring touch he displayed last year when he had 30 goals, his shooting percentage was only 12% last year. So it's not like he had some crazy 20% shooting percentage. He had 30 goals, 50 points, and you felt like the trajectory was going up for him. This year, he's gotten more ice time, and the shooting percentage has dropped by like a point. but he's got 10 goals in 41 games. I just don't think he's shooting as much. Yeah, he's taking almost a full shot per game less, 2.76 to 2.1. So just a bit over half a shot. Anyway, so what do you do? A guy that's on pace to put up 60 points now, plays top 6 minutes. He was close to 30. How much does a guy like that make when he's turning 24 next season, right? Like, is he a 5x5 kind of guy? Do you give him lots of term? Do you 2x3.5 him or something like that? Do you 7x6 him or something like that, right? Like, I feel like there's multiple avenues you could go. So I know I'm kind of throwing those numbers at you off the cuff, but that's the one that I have the hardest time. Well, there's other players, but he's the one I have the hardest time guessing what he's going to be making.
Well, you look at this team, right? And you look at when you're deciding whether or not you want to bridge a player, right? There's kind of a couple different ideas that go behind it. A, what's your cap structure looking like? And B, how much more are you going to have to pay someone if they go and have success? So basically, the idea would be obviously bridging a player takes a lot of risk out of the player. If you bridge a player and they're not what you thought they were going to be, you either save a ton of money or can get rid of the player. Now, I think JJ Peterka is going to be a productive player in this NHL. So, basically the miss you're trying to relegate is you're trying to figure out what he is as a player. Because if you look at his kind of season so far, right, his first season is more reminiscent of this season here, where he had the more assists than goals, and he's at a decent pace. But last year you saw his goal scoring touch. So you need to figure out, is this kind of like a third year slump and he's going to be fine next year? Is he going to be an inconsistent goal scorer? And the best way to figure that out, right, is to give him a 2 to 3 year bridge at, $3.5, $4 million, whatever it is. And then if he is what you were hoping he was, then you extend him at maybe what it's 8x8 or whatever it is after that. You said he's 20.
He's 23. He's going to be turning 24 for next season.
So let's say you give him a 3-year bridge, 27, and then you sign him to a 6-year extension after that, 33. Sounds about right. So,
sorry, speaking of, happy birthday, JJ Peterka. As we are recording this, I was like, wait, he's 23 in 0 days? And I was like, wait a second. I was just looking at the numbers here, and obviously they do the age he will be, the oldest age, I think, or like the whatever he's turning that season. Yeah. So Hockey Reference has him at 23 going into the year, and I scrolled up. I'm like, okay, yeah, is he 23 turning 24? No, so happy birthday, JJ. I think JJ is the kind of guy that I don't want to bridge. I personally believe that he's shown enough to earn that contract, right? Like to have 32 points in 41 games this season. You would think a rising tide lifts all ships. So as the team performs better, he will, but he's been one of the only guys that's still been consistent. I think has earned his contract. He's number 2 on the team in points. Sure, the goal scoring's not quite as good, but he's turned into more of a passer. Right, when you're looking at a guy and his career high season, let's contrast this with Dylan Cousins. JJ Peterka had 28 goals. That's his career high right now. He's not on pace to get there. He's on pace for 20, 8-goal setback. But you look at why? Well, he's shooting less, and his shooting percentage only went down from 12.4 to 11.6 so far this season. He could get hot and get to 25. So I think we might have a perennial 20, 25 goal scorer. And I think he's showing you, like you said, he's on pace for 40 assists. I think that's the kind of guy that, as he gets to play with line mates that aren't awful and can score, right, as the team rounds itself out, I think he's the kind of player you would build the future around here in Buffalo. Tage Thompson, JJ Peterka, those are like 2 guys that I think if I know players that I don't want to move in a trade, I think JJ is on that list. Now, I'm sure somebody could offer me something where I'm like, yeah, you know what, I might give up JJ Peterka. I think Tage Thompson and Dahlin are untouchable, but I would say Peterka's probably in that next category of that A tier. He's not untouchable, but it's going to be highly valued.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. So you're talking about going long term with Jack Quinn then. So what's the number you'd be comfortable with?
Oh, sorry, JJ.
Sorry.
I think I don't know if I want to give out another 7-year deal, because if at some point we have to blow it up, like we have to, but I don't know, maybe 5 years, like a $6 million. I feel like somewhere in that range. I feel
Okay.
like that might even be a bit rich. I don't know the projections. I know there's a lot smarter people than me out there that do these kinds of projections,
Mhm.
and I don't know if they've released them yet. Because I know they
So
like release them midway through this year, but like maybe 5 by 6.
okay. So here's my take here for you as well. So there's kind of two scenarios with JJ Paterka, right? I think we've established he's going to be a second line forward in this league pretty much no matter what. 50, 60 points. Sounds like that's his floor. His ceiling is a 30, 35 goal scorer. No, he could be a first line forward. So let's say you lock him up to what was you saying 7 by 5?
No, I was saying like 6 by 5, so $30 million
6 by 5.
deal over 5 years.
Sure, sure, sure. And let's say it takes him 2 years to start hitting what he's trying to hit there. So that takes him to on a 5 year deal, at least 4 years at the end of the deal. So at that point, at the end of the deal, he's a unrestricted free agent, and you no longer have control over him. The one benefit of bridging him is if you see he's about to be what he is, yes, maybe you have to pay some more money, but you can extend him to 8 years, and now you have that talent under control for 8 years.
Okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. I'm just worried that we did this with Reinhardt, where he basically kind of stepped him all the way to UFA and then had to get
Mhm.
rid of him in the last year he was an RFA,
I see.
and sent him to Florida. So what I'm worried about is that JJ's always kind of in this limbo land where we think he's a good second liner, but we think there's potential there, which is kind of why I want to do like maybe 5 years would be bad because then he's all of a sudden in our UFA after it. But
Yeah.
again, I'm not sure how much of this core, with Tage, Cousins, Dahlin, Power, Samuelson, all signed. I mean, we're talking to 2030. That core is signed to 2030. So I guess a 5 year deal would put him right in that 2030, 2031 window,
Hmm.
right with Power and Samuelson and Tage and Cousins. And like that would essentially add to the core. The guy I hope they don't do that with is Jack Quinn.
Okay. Okay.
Jack Quinn to me is the prime candidate for a bridge. So I'd be willing to give 5, 6, 7, even 8 years. Probably not 8, but something like that to JJ Paterka. I want to see no more than 2 for Jack Quinn. Because
Yeah.
Jack Quinn is quite frankly AHL level right now. Like he
Yeah.
is
He's
horrible.
at a
And
regression.
we talked about how he was on a heater, and you look at the stats, and sure, he's doing a lot better over his last 5 games, last 10 games, and he's putting the puck in the net. But otherwise, the dude has been an absolute liability on the ice. He turns the puck over regularly. So
Mm.
let's see, in his last 10 games, he has, sorry, this is the last 11. Let's just go with the last 10. He's got 5 goals, 5 assists in his last 10 games. He's playing
Brilliant.
15 minutes a night. He's even. But you look at his advanced analytics, he's one of the worst players on the Sabres. He's got the second worst expected goals for percentage at 43.98. And the only guy worse than Jack Quinn as far as expected goals for percentage is Sam Lafferty. But Sam Lafferty is playing fourth line. He's been in and out of the lineup. Only 32 games, less than 300 minutes of time on ice at 5-on-5. Quinn's played 433 minutes of 5-on-5 ice time and has a 43.98% expected goals for percentage. I mean, to put that in perspective, JJ Paterka, I mean, he's not like a stud, but he's at 49.4%. So we can see that the Sabres are a much better team when he's out there than when he's not. So Jack Quinn is like, just, I know he's scoring, but he's not helping this team at all. And to make matters even worse, I know he's scoring a ton, but those expected goals numbers aren't coming from high danger chances either. He's at
Mm.
38.2% high danger chance for. Like,
Mm.
nobody else, even Sam Lafferty, has a better high danger chance for percentage than he does. Nobody that's played substantial time has had a 38%.
That's brutal. That's where you're supposed to get most of your goals from. You look at all the great goal scorers, right? Outside of Ovechkin in his office, most of them, if they're going to be getting their goals, right, they're going to be from the high danger chances. And I think maybe some people don't know where high danger chances again are. It's from that little area between the dots, right around the crease, including the crease itself, basically from the red line at the bottom all the way around to the face-off dots. So it's that area closest to the goaltender, left, right, and in front of the net.
And those are the gritty areas that for years Sabres fans have been talking about getting to. and oh, we don't generate enough, and we're finally generating them. But oh my God, you just look at the high danger chances against per 60 minutes, and Jason Zucker sure is giving up a ton. Dylan Cousins is actually giving up the most. So Vancouver fans, good luck. If he does come your way for Pettersson, you're not getting a two-way dynamo. You're getting a guy who generates less than 10, 9.99. Yes, I'm being a little bit nitpicky, but less than 10 high danger chances for per 60 and 13.36 against per 60. To put that in perspective, Thompson, Dahlin, and Peterka all have fewer than 9.7 against per 60. So they're doing a good job of limiting the opposition's chances. In the meantime, they're also generating a ton of high danger chances for, like, Thompson's at 57%, Dahlin's at 57%, even Zucker, despite him giving up a ton, is at 51%. Yuri Kulik's at 50.6, even Yoki Haru and JJ Peterka's at 48.88. Like, it's kind of crazy. So JJ Peterka's become a non-event player, which is why I think this year is just kind of, it's weird for him.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's something he's trying to focus on, being more defensive, or Lindy Ruff's trying to drill it into him, but to see JJ Peterka at sub 10 high danger chances for or against is not really the type of player that JJ Peterka is.
Yeah, definitely not what he was last year, for sure.
And part of that could be Granato let him really wheel and deal in the offensive zone, so he generated more. But I don't know, man. Jack Quinn to me is the guy that I don't even want him anymore, but bridge him.
I agree. He's just a little too volatile, and I think he's just the type of player where this is what you worry about when you worry about offensive players busting. Is you worry about offensive players who seem to have great offensive wheels and have this shot or whatever, but just can't back it up defensively. Look at, there's been hundreds of players in the AHL who will put up amazing point totals as forwards, and you're like, why aren't they in the NHL? It's because they just never developed those that defense. You can think about it from the Canucks side. You think of players like Nikolai Goldobin, like lots of these European players as well, in particular, the Russians, the Swedes. They'll have all the tools to be there, but they just don't have that firepower. So I think Joshua Hosang's another great example. Probably a good enough offensive player to be in the NHL, but just doesn't have the defense to back it up. And it's, again, a style that works in places like the KHL, which is why, again, you'll see a lot of Russians like that. Sergei Shirokov for Canucks fans. I'm sure there's plenty of Sabres examples as well.
Daniel Sprong for you guys.
Daniel Sprong, another good example. But you just don't see these players stick around. So hopefully Jack Quinn, with the right coaching and the right development, can develop that defense and then come back up to the NHL. But right now, you just don't know what you have in him. So I think bridging him is the only good choice to do.
That's the only thing we can do, unless they're ready to give up on him, which I don't think they are. But he's starting to enter his prime. He's 23. By the time the bridge contract's probably over, he will be in his prime. And I just hope, I hope to God that they're smarter than this. They haven't really proven to me, but they're like, oh my God, he scores a lot of goals. Like, he's a guy that needs $6 million over 7 years. And it's like, no, don't do that. Please don't do that. Right? Like, he had a really good shooting percentage last year. He didn't play a lot of games. He seems to be like a 12. He's a good shooter. Don't get me wrong. But until I can see him do something other than like toe drag, shoot, like that's all he does, dude. He's got 64 shots on goal this year, and I'm pretty sure 60 of them came after a toe drag. I'm not even kidding. I've never seen Jack Quinn take just a regular wrister. He always has to toe drag, and I don't know if it's just like the only way he feels comfortable.
The LB button. Whoop.
Yeah, just all the time, dude. Like, it's crazy. But no, and then the blue line, we'll see what happens with Byram. I'd be down to bring him back. I don't think he's been spectacular. I don't think he's been a liability. I think he's exactly fine for us, but it's just, what is he going to ask for? You're paying Dahlin $11 million. Totally worth it, right? We see Dahlin as like a top 5 points pace, despite missing like those 10 games and playing on this team. Are you kidding me? Top 10?
He's a certified top pairing defenseman. Absolutely worth it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. You look at the analytics, and Tage Thompson and Dahlin are a 1C and a 1D. Like, those are hard to find. It's just the Sabres roster construction has been so mismanaged. They have too many of the same type of players, right? That's why Zucker has been such a great addition to the team, because he does the things that a lot of these other guys aren't, and he complements their game. And they don't have complementary styles. They've got Quinn, who's a dangling scorer, and they've got Peterka, who's a dangling offensive player, and they've got Dylan Cousin, who's a dangling scorer, and it's like they're all the same, all three of those guys.
Hmm.
And Alex Tuck, I don't know. I think they just give him too many minutes. He's like kind of a good two-way goal scorer
He
that
is their
can.
biggest plus by a mile, to be fair.
Yes, that is true, but I don't know. He scored. I feel like that's because of his shorthanded goals. I don't know how
Yeah.
many goals he's got shorthanded here. He has three shorthanded goals. So there you go. That's boosting it a little bit. But no,
That's a
you're
small
right.
factor, yeah.
He's generally been a plus player. So he's been a good two-way player, but I don't think he's a top line player like they had thought he was. I think he's a second
Mhm.
line player. And I think that's the big thing for the Sabres is this offseason, this year, they need to figure out like, hey, we don't really have a top liner outside of Thompson. Maybe it's Peterka, right? But we need to see him shoot the puck more and be a little bit more aggressive, creating chances, even if it means giving up chances on the back end. And then, you'd be fine to have Peterka and Thompson, and then maybe go out and get just one more player, right? Maybe it is a Pedersen. But really, it just comes down to I think the Sabres, they need more elite talent, and I think a lot of the players they've drafted have turned into good talent, and Tuck is good talent, and they need more top end guys. I think they need somebody else to help drive the offense, somebody else to help score goals, and that's easier said than done. But they have so many prospects and so many of these good players, plus prospects, plus futures. Like I feel like they can go to a team and make it work for somebody who can give them that what they need. But listen, we'll see if they keep this pace up and they start to get a little closer. It's one thing, but don't forget, guys, they're in 10th in the
Yeah.
wild card race, right? So they've got to pass. I think that's what, like 6, 7, 8 teams they got to pass. So it's cool and all that they're on pace to be like 3-4 points out, but they got to pass so many teams that I'll believe it when I see it, but I'm going to keep pumping the brakes. But I'll enjoy the wins. I'm not worried about draft picks. It's not like we're going to ruin our tank position
Yeah,
if we
absolutely.
win. So I'm hoping that Jack Quinn proves to me that he's worth money. Otherwise, yikes.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think when you talk about elite players, right, we have to think about what are the ways that teams can acquire talent, right? There's 3 or 4 different ways. So you have trading. So you see an elite talent, you put together a package, you go get them. There's free agency, where again, Buffalo has a ton of money um, available and they can go get a free agent. Again, that's a bit of a hard task, right? Because you got to pitch the team, pitch the ownership, pitch the everything, right? Outside of the city and the fans, right? It's a very tough sell to get someone to come to Buffalo. But if you can, right, that's one way of doing it. And then the other way is through the draft. Those are your 3 ways essentially of acquiring talent outside of the rare, scouting Russia and signing someone out of there. Um, so what the Sabres need to figure out, right? If the season continues to go the way it's going to go, even if they end up in like 10th in the East, 11th in the East, right? Is how do you use the assets you currently have to go acquire elite talent? Like you said, you have 2 pieces of elite talent in Rasmus Dahlin and Tage Thompson, but what can you go and get to support that in terms of more elite talent, whether it's, someone else in the back end, power. Oh, there's actually one other way to your current talent developing. So you look at someone like Owen Power, he may very well develop to that point where, maybe not as good as Darling, but he could really be that elite number 2 defenseman. And if you're banking on that happening, then maybe you go acquire, another winger for Tage or a second C, like you're looking in Vancouver where you have Pedersen and Miller. Which again, I know this year maybe hasn't looked so effective, but last year looked very effective. And look at like when Kadri was elite, you look at that McKinnon Kadri core. When you look at Toronto, who I know haven't had much playoff success, but at least in the regular season, Matthews, Tavares. You look at the Oilers, McDavid slash Draisaitl and Nugent Hopkins. If depending on how they decide to run that center core, it's very very viable to have 2 elite centers driving their own lines. So whether it's a center, whether it's a winger, even a defenseman, if you just want to keep Owen Power on the second pairing, you're right. They need to acquire elite talent because elite talent is what separates these teams in this league.
Yeah, and I think it was one of those we didn't have enough data, so they had a great season, and then they took a step back, and we were like, okay, well that was Granato, right? Granato, the team was not playing sustainably, and then they took a step back, and that was the coach, and then we hoped that Lindy Ruff would get them back to the 22-23 time,
Mm-hmm.
and he hasn't. The team has regressed even further than that. I mean, they're on pace to match last year's point total, right? If they, like I said, if they keep up the pace they're on since the 13-game losing streak, they'd have 84 points. They had 84 last year. I clearly think at this point it's a roster construction thing, and the core of the roster is a 500 core. You got to add a player that's going to get you 10 points to really start thinking that you could be a 94, a playoff team, right? You got to get to that 94 point plateau before we start talking about a playoff team. So I think if you add somebody that can even boost you by 7 points, and then you get incremental upgrades from, like, Cousins no longer sucks. Jack Quinn is no longer an absolute anchor. Paterka goes back to scoring, right? Or maybe Zucker keeps up, is right. There's these little incremental ways, like you said, for the roster currently, but I don't think there's enough there to say that this team needs to be there's no like 10, 12 point increase for us here. So I don't think that's on the roster currently, but Toronto's an interesting one. We'll talk about them next time, though, Abby. I mean, the Sabres, it's just scratch your head and just hopefully the games aren't too dreadful. Hopefully the Canucks do turn it around, though. I think they will. I think as they get healthier, there's enough talent, right? You guys have the elite talent where the Sabres don't, so I think that should be good. But that is all I have for today, guys. Make sure if you're following us on Twitter to shout us out there. Let us know what players you're looking at on X. Sorry, yes, formerly known as Twitter. But shout us out there and let us know what you're looking at for both seasons and teams. And should the Canucks go out and make a big splashy move or a small move? Should the Sabres sell off or buy? Or are you worried about the draft? Or what are you worried about right now in Saberland? So, but guys, as always, I appreciate you listening to us for the entire time. Follow us on YouTube. The Expansion Bros podcast is Rybread SN is the YouTube channel, and then you can find us wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Thank you guys so much for listening. That's all for today, and I will talk to you guys in the next one.
Peace.